overview here, but I'm going to give you like every possible combination using interval notation, and it's in your book, but I would recommend writing it down, especially if interval notation was something that you struggled with a little bit last year. It's all about how you can write your answer, right? An inequality, we can say like x is greater than 7, x is less than 6. If your endpoint is included, which means like less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. So that means like if you see signs like this, it's included, then that means we use a bracket. Bracket means it includes the endpoint. If the endpoint is not included, so that means if it's just less than or greater than, then we use a parenthesis to denote that. So I'm going to kind of give you every possible combination. We talked about whether it's open or closed, and infinity is thrown in there. And so let's just kind of go through that. So there's a little chart in your book that gives you the interval, what the inequality looks like, and what the graph would look like. Can you see that or not see that? So the first one is an open interval. It says parenthesis, and I'll just write that up here. I like the parenthesis one. Parenthesis A to B, parenthesis. That's the same as saying everything in between A and B, but not including A and B, right? And so inequalities, interval notation, they mean the same thing. It's just different ways of writing it. And in upper level math classes, in pre-calculus and in calculus, I make them do this, but in algebra 2, we don't. When you graph this, instead of making an open circle or a closed circle, remember how you've done that before? Like open circle means not included, closed circle means included. When you graph this on a number line, you make a parenthesis or a bracket. So if you were going to graph this between A and B, you actually put parenthesis A, parenthesis B, and you shade what's in between. So no more open, closed circles. It's parentheses and brackets on our graphs. And so now there's just lots of options here. So what if we had the same interval, but we include the endpoints? So this would be the closed interval, bracket A, bracket B. So you got to know bracket means it includes the endpoints. And notice the difference in the inequalities. It means that everything between A and B, including A and B. And notice the graph, same thing, except for you have brackets at your endpoint to show that they are included. Do you remember this now? Yeah. And so then we could have like one half could be open, one half could be closed. I don't know if they get both of those or not. Yeah, I'm just going to show you both of these, and it's up to you if you want to write both of them. But like, what if A was included and B wasn't? Or what if A wasn't included and B was, right? Half of it can be a parenthesis, half of it can be a bracket. They say half open because they're a glass half full kind of people, but if you said half closed, that would be right too. Like they call this a half open interval. Sometimes if I'm in a grumpy mood, I call it a half closed interval because I'm a glass half empty kind of person. You know that? If you see the glass half empty or half full. If you're like optimistic, they say you're a glass half full kind of person because when you say, oh, that's half full, we get the concept. And if you're pessimistic and you always think bad, then you're a glass half empty kind of person because when you stage left. What? Pessimistic?
It just means like you think of everything as
Negative. Like me, like I always think everything terrible is happening. Like if my husband isn't home at the normal time and he hasn't told me that he's late, like I always think he's in a wreck and he's dead. And so like I always text him and say, just making sure you're alive still because I always think the worst. Like wow.
And then he looks at it and he does right.
I know, right?
So then
I hate tell him. I sing that hate tell. What that is. If there's an app on your phone to hate tell, it's like a walkie-talkie, so you don't have to text, you just push it and it plays my voice. It says, hey, are you dead? I just want to make sure you're okay.
So he still has to be at the phone.
It's okay. You can talk.
What is it again? I want to
Hey tell. H-E-Y-T-E-L. Yeah, well, I don't think I have a new enough phone for that.
I really did it.
I have an old phone. What do you have? Yeah, I think I don't have a new enough iPhone to do that. A 4. To speak to my phone and make it write what I want it to text. still, I feel like then it doesn't say, like, then you still have to read it to see if it typed what you really wanted it to say, right? Yeah. All right. Then we have the intervals that go to infinity. And I just learned from my pre-calculus class that Mr. McClure teaches you to make infinity signs with two circles next to each other. And I am not a fan of this because we are grown-ups and we can make infinity signs better. So we're going to have a little lesson right here to make an infinity sign. That you can just start in the middle of the infinity sign and you just go around, right? Oh, not two circles. Oh, this is so much better. Maybe he's just bad at it, so he teaches you that. My pre-calculus class this year, they were like, wow, you're really good at making infinity signs. And I was like, what? And they're like, Mr. McClure always just tells us to make two circles next to each other. And I'm like, what does he tell you to do? And I went over and yelled at him. And he said, they're just so bad at it. I just tell them to make two circles. But apparently it's him. He's so bad at it. Like,
He writes really fast.
just practice. Just like when you learn to make your numbers. Sometimes they get a little messy, but practice, okay? You have to have some perseverance. I told my pre-cal class, I used to make my fives like this, but then my teacher made his fives like that, and I thought it was super cool to put the line on top. So one day during notes, instead of taking notes, I just made fives over and over and over again. And guess what? I make my fives like that now, because I trained myself. You know what else I didn't used to be able to do? This. I used to not be able to do this. And you know how I learned? I tape my fingers together. One day I just scotch tape my fingers, and all day I'm like, look at me, I'm training my fingers, and I can do this now. But this side, I didn't tape this side because I didn't train those fingers. So you just got to practice. Right. I was a kid when I did it. Because if I was thinking, why wouldn't I tape this side too? Because most of the time, if you can do one side, you can do the other. But I just scotch tape this hand and not this hand. So anyway, just so you know, you can teach yourself to make an infinity sign. You gotta try. Infinity is not a number. Infinity is like a concept of like, infinity just keeps going, right? There is no biggest number. So when you write infinity, you never put a bracket because it's not a number, it's not closed. So if you have just a number that keeps going on forever, including a, we say bracket a to infinity, bracket, and we shade all the way to the end of the graph, right? That we shade an arrow because it keeps going forever and ever and ever. And then we could go the other way too. Well, I'm just going to show you all these. Okay, I won't show you so many at once. These two are exactly the same, except for this one does not include the endpoint, so it would be parenthesis a to infinity. That would just be like not including a. Again, parentheses go all the way to infinity. If you go the other direction, the left endpoint is your lowest number. So if you're going less than forever, then you're going to negative infinity. And the one mistake I think that happens a lot on these is people want to put negative infinity as the second number, right? Negative infinity is always the smaller of the two. So if your number is going less than or equal to, you have to write negative infinity first. But it could just be including the endpoint or not including the endpoint. And notice that we shade to the left. Yes. Some of them, I think. Illustrate the inequality using the real number line. So yes, they want you to do that. And then the last one is if all real numbers is the solution, right? So if it's all real numbers, we write it as negative infinity to infinity, and we do that with domain a lot. And so that means it would be the entire number line shaded in. That's every possible combination for interval notation. So I thought I would give that to you, and it should make your homework a lot easier. Part of your homework today is just going from this, and you have to write an interval notation. Part of your homework is they give you interval notation, and they want you to make the inequality. So it's just kind of practicing this, and then we're going to solve a couple inequalities as well. No, we're going to just do a few.
I wasn't trying to insult you or anything. I really just thought you.
Oh, I know. I was just trying to read the directions for the homework so I could answer Vaughn's. question. Getting a little short. I use red the most, look. Can you see that? Right. I know what, I should do this. No, not this. This, and it'll still be red, but it's just habit. I just always pick up the red.
Or just go over and switch color. You never use red. You never
Alright, I'm
use
going.
red.
How could that really so dull though?
Well, because I actually press when I'm writing.
Would you go back?
So she writes really like,
Why do you like blue?
That's how it goes dull, because I do that.
Yeah, I like blue.
Here's why. I used to always do my notes in blue, so my notes were in blue print. And so I didn't want to write on it in blue also. I wanted to write in a different color. But now in your guys' class, I tend to always just use black, so maybe I'll just start using blue. Oh man, now we're not even still there.
What about green, actually?
No, I don't like green.
I don't like green either.
It's kind of gross green.
green is like money. You know like money?
Yeah, it is.
You good? Okay. So let's check a couple of these and make sure we can do this. It says, and this is what your homework says, write each inequality using interval notation and illustrate it on a number line. And yes, making on a number line isn't that much fun, but it's not that hard to do, so, you know, don't cry about it. And when they give the test back, yeah. I've had kids cry. Sometimes in calculus I have to say, like, don't cry before I hand this back. We're going to talk about it and it's going to get better. I think I might have said that. So, one time after a test I brought donuts into calculus and they were like, so how bad is this test since you brought us donuts?
Yeah, I broke down in this for first class, but I got my first.
So, but a lot of times kids wait till they leave my class and cry, and then at lunch, other teachers like, so I heard you made so-and-so cry today, and I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, they're bawling in my class about their grade. And I'm like, they got a B. And then I'm always confused with what happened, but I usually hear about it afterwards that I made people cry. So remember that included means bracket. So do you agree that this would just be bracket 1 to 3 bracket? And if what's great about the number line, now that you make brackets or parentheses, like if you know this, making the number line, all you do is make a 1 and a 3, and I don't care how many numbers you make. Like I usually just draw the two numbers that are included. If it was 1 to 17, I'd put 1 and 17 the same distance apart that I put 1 and 3. And I'm just going to put bracket, bracket, shade in the middle. Most of it, yeah. Here, let's skip that one. Can I go this way? Oh. Can we skip B?
Yes.
It would be, well, I'll just write it. Let's just not graph it. This would just be parentheses, right? Because less than, greater than, not line underneath it means parentheses. So that would be parentheses, -4 to 0.
So the
Yes, it's always lowest number, biggest number. So you have to put the smallest number to the left. Come on. If there's only one number in the inequality, then you're going to have either infinity or negative infinity in your answer because it's always two things, a left endpoint and a right endpoint. How do you know whether it's infinity or negative infinity? Look at the sign. If I'm going greater than 5, do you agree that 5 is the lowest number I'm going to have? And is 5 included or not included? So that would be parenthesis 5, and it goes on forever. So to show that, I put infinity, and I always have a parenthesis next to my infinity. And if you were going to graph that, at 5, I'm going to put a parenthesis, and I'm going to show that it's shaded on forever and ever. Now this is the one that I think people make the most mistakes on, because they want to say 1 to negative infinity, but just make sure you pay attention that your left endpoint is your lowest number and your right endpoint is your biggest number. So if I'm going less than or equal to 1, 1 is the biggest that it's ever going to get. So 1 is my right endpoint, and since it's included, I'm going to put a bracket. And if it just keeps going down forever, then I have to put negative infinity to 1. What's with the I?
I don't know. I've always done that my whole life.
So if I was graphing that, I would put bracket around 1, and it's going to the left, so I put a left bracket, and it would be shaded like this.
I think it's a curse of how they I didn't know it hurts.
Say something else for like a week. Say something else.
Train yourself.
Yeah, train yourself.
What should I say?
Thanks a lot. I don't know.
The other part of your homework is, what if they gave you this? Could you make the inequality? We might not try too much of this here. It says write each interval as an inequality and illustrate on a number line. Just to practice. If you were in pre-cal last year, we did this over and over again, but I don't know how much you did in Algebra 2. Like in pre-calculus, I always have to remind kids at the beginning of the year about this. So, those of you that just took Algebra 2 last year, I don't know how much you use this notation.
What I don't know.
A lot. Set notation. The first year that Mr. McClure taught Algebra 2, he used set notation and not interval notation, and then I yelled at him. So now I use it.
She said like he showed the notation.
Yeah. This is better. So this, make sure you use a letter, and we usually use X, but technically you could use whatever letter you want. But this is saying everything between 1 and 4, and it's nice because this is the smaller number, this is the bigger number. This is included, so it's going to have a line underneath it. This one is not included, so it's not. And as long as you write it like this, it's always just less than signs, right? This is saying X is less than 4, but bigger than 1, but when you turn it around, it looks like that. And if I was going to graph this side's a bracket, this side's a parenthesis, shade in the middle. Oh, I hate that it won't let me just do that. I want to skip the middle one. But then you'll see it, and you'll want to do it. Oh, let's do it. Let's skip those two. We'll change that to B. Kind of over this interval notation already. What's wrong, Nathan? Circles. I have some people that used to always turn their paper sideways and make it 8 and then turn their paper back the other way. That's a little bit ridiculous, I think. But just practice. I told my pre-cal class I was going to make tracing papers because my son was learning his numbers in kindergarten and they had to trace the numbers 1 through 10 a million times. So I told him I was going to make tracing infinity signs for you. But I didn't. Oh, he knows infinity. Like, he asked me what the biggest number was, so we talked about that he knows infinity is the biggest thing that can ever be. And that there is no biggest number because it just keeps getting bigger. He doesn't know how to make the infinity sign yet, but he knows the concept of infinity. What about this one? How would you write this inequality? Vaughn, what do you think? Yeah. No, I want this, like with this. Right? This one's just getting smaller forever. Not including it. Right? So if you see infinity in it, you're only going to have one number, and I can graph this at -3, parenthesis, less than. Right? That's part of your homework going to be super fast today, right?
Yeah.
The other part of your homework today is just solving some inequalities, but the big thing is you have to put them in interval or the directions say set notation, so I'll show you that, but I really think interval notation is better. And on your unit test, if you don't put it in the right notation, you're not going to get your points on that. So that's why I want to make sure that we understand this. So you don't really have to write this part on your homework, but it is in the directions of your homework. Solve each inequality. Make sure you write your answers using either set notation or interval notation. You don't have to graph your solution. But look at this great problem. 3x minus 7 is greater than 2. How do you solve such a problem like that? We just want to get x by itself, right? It's not squared. So I'm just going to add 7 and get 3x is greater than 9. And I'm going to divide by 3, and I get x is greater than 3. So interval notation, that would be starting at 3, not including 3, and going to infinity. Set notation is where you say, like, you have the little squiggly brackets. Like, if this is my answer, I could say the answer is all x such that x is greater than 3 bracket. If you don't include that stuff with set notation, like if you just say x is greater than 3, that's not set notation. But it does say use either one. I'm a big interval notation fan, so I'm going to use that. But set notation is acceptable. So you solve this one. It's a little tricky. Did you hear you get tomatoes with dip for lunch today? Tomatoes with dip is on your menu today for lunch.
That's really exciting.
Tomatoes with dip, carrots with dip, celery with dip. We decided they bought a big fruit tray or vegetable tray because you had celery with dip, carrots with dip, now you have tomatoes with dip.
But the thing is, they didn't even have any dip. They had to get some of the containers.
Well, what do you want the dip to be in?
Well, they usually have like a big old scoop of it.
Oh, I see. So we subtract 1, right? And then what do we do? But you got to remember, with inequalities, if you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, you got to flip that inequality sign. So this changes from less than or equal to greater than or equal to -1. So that's the one little trick there. So my answer here would be including -1 to infinity. Or that would be the set notation. What? I feel like it's easier to forget set notation because you just get your answer and go on, but you're right, it's not that bad. It's a little bit uglier when we do compound inequalities, which we're going to do tomorrow, because you have like and or stuff. But hey, guess what? That's it. So you're going to do 24 through 38. That's supposed to say even, kids, not times 3. 38 is not a multiple of 3. And then 54 through 66, even also. You don't get to check if you want.
Oh, you don't mind if you can take it.
But you actually have a good amount of time to work on this, like 12 minutes. And this whole first set is just writing it like what we did. Like, it's going to be really fast to do. So